The sun was golden that afternoon, casting a soft hue over a quiet suburb as Maya Walker walked hand in hand with her husband Marcus. They weren't rushing, just enjoying the breeze, a cone of strawberry ice cream in his hand, vanilla in hers. Nothing about the moment felt dangerous. No signs of a storm. Just a peaceful day between two people in love, until a screech of tires, two patrol cars, and the click of loaded weapons shattered their calm. Within moments, a black man was lying face down in a pool of blood, gasping for air. Maya froze. Her scream tore through the neighborhood. But what those officers didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that she wasn't just a grieving wife. She was Delta Force. Welcome back to Talecraft, where we tell powerful real-world stories that reveal the strength of the human spirit. And if you're joining us for the first time, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, because we bring you stories the world needs to hear. Let me ask you something. What happens when someone trained for war is forced to fight injustice at home? What happens when those wearing the badge forget who they're dealing with? Today's story isn't just about injustice. It's about hidden power. It's about a woman who lived in silence, whose resume was classified, whose skills were buried beneath domestic calm, until the system she trusted broke her heart. When Maya's husband was gunned down by officers who judged him by skin and not by soul, they didn't just make a fatal mistake. They declared war on someone whose battlefield experience far outmatched their training. But she didn't respond with bullets. She responded with brilliance. In this video you'll discover how a widow became a warrior once more, not by picking up a rifle but by using everything she learned from the battlefield to fight a different kind of enemy: systemic racism, power abuse, and silence. You'll see how her patience, intelligence, and relentless resolve exposed a crooked department and brought nationwide attention to a hidden hero. And you'll realize something else. This story could have been just another forgotten tragedy, but Maya made sure it wouldn't be. Why does this story matter? Because it's not fiction. It's a reflection of the world we live in. Because it shows us that the people we overlook might be the strongest among us. Because it teaches us that silence doesn't equal weakness. And because justice, true justice, is often forged in grief. So stay with us as we walk through this incredible tale of loss, legacy, and revenge served not with violence, but with unstoppable truth. This is Talecraft, and Maya's story is just beginning. It started like any other Saturday. Maya and Marcus had no plans beyond the park and a late lunch. He wore his usual laid-back grin, the kind that made Maya forget for a moment that she had once disarmed bombs in Afghanistan. Civilian life had softened her edges, or at least that's what she let the world believe. Marcus was humming some old R&B tune as they walked toward their car, parked just a block down from the local coffee shop. He paused to toss their empty cones in a trash bin when the first squad car rolled in. The second car followed within seconds, both flanking the couple like predators circling prey. Two white officers stepped out, badges gleaming, hands already hovering over their weapons. "Hey, step away from the vehicle," one of them barked, eyes locked on Marcus. Confused, Marcus lifted his hands, trying to understand. He began, but they didn't let him finish. One reached for his holster while the other shouted conflicting commands. Maya's instincts screamed, but she forced herself to stay still. Then it happened. A single, deafening shot cracked through the street. Marcus crumpled to the pavement like a marionette with cut strings. Maya's world slowed. She dropped to her knees beside him, screaming his name. Blood seeped from his chest, warm and too fast. His hand twitched in hers as his eyes fluttered. "Don't go," she begged, pressing down with trembling fingers. But her voice was fading behind the chaos. Officers yelling, neighbors gathering, cell phones rising. One officer kicked Marcus's phone away, muttering something about threatening behavior. Maya didn't hear the rest. She was staring at the love of her life, who had just been executed in daylight. Paramedics were called, but it was for show. Marcus died before they arrived. The officers tried to contain the scene, scrambling to find a justification. They handcuffed Maya as she sat in shock, drenched in her husband's blood. "Stay still, ma'am, for your own safety," one officer growled, not knowing he was talking to a woman who'd disarmed terrorists under enemy fire. She didn't resist. She didn't scream. She simply stared at them with a calm that unsettled even the younger cop, who looked away first. They said Marcus matched the description of a carjacking suspect. That his phone looked like a weapon. That he reached for something. That his size made them fear for their lives. But Maya knew the truth. It was because he was a black man. In their eyes, his skin was the threat. He never stood a chance. But they didn't know who his wife was. Not yet. Hours later, Maya sat in an interrogation room, dried blood under her nails, her wrists bruised from the cuffs. She answered their questions with cold precision. No, we weren't armed. No, he didn't resist. Yes, I'd like to speak to a lawyer. They gave each other looks, another grieving wife, another report to bury. They didn't know she had already memorized every badge number, every radio call sign, every detail of the body language that would later contradict their reports. The department labeled it a tragic misunderstanding. Maya labeled it something else, a declaration of war. Not on her country, but on the very system she once fought to protect. And if they thought she'd fade away like the others, they had no idea what kind of storm they'd just awakened. Maya sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, the smell of Marcus's cologne still lingering on his hoodie draped over the back of a chair. The world outside was spinning with protests, hashtags, and outrage, but inside she was still. Too still. Her fingers traced the edge of an old photograph on the mantel. Her in uniform, arms around a squad of men twice her size, all wearing the same blood and dust expressions. Delta Force, Black Ops missions, off-the-books deployments, and years of operating in shadows. They didn't even put her real name on the records. Just Reaper 6. But that was a different life. After leaving the military, Maya had locked that chapter away. Her medals were boxed up. Her combat boots stuffed in the back of a closet behind yoga mats and grocery bags. She never told Marcus the full story. Just bits and pieces, the deserts, the nights without sleep, the missions that never made the news. He knew she was strong, disciplined. But he never knew she once took down an armed convoy alone, or that she could reload blindfolded, or that her reflexes were so sharp. A general once said she could sense a threat before it happened. That woman was buried. Until now. The rage inside her boiled quietly, methodically. Not the rage of grief alone, but the rage of someone trained to dismantle injustice with precision. She didn't scream or punch walls. She made lists, traced patterns, dug into databases she hadn't accessed in years. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical confidence as she pulled up body cam footage, traffic logs, scanner archives. She watched the video of Marcus's death again, slower this time, watching their hands, their positioning, noting the fear in their faces. They had panicked, and she knew what panic looked like in combat. It was the look a rookie gave when he didn't know who the real enemy was. Days passed. She visited Marcus's mother, held her trembling hands, promised her justice. But justice wasn't going to be a hashtag. It wasn't going to be a candlelight vigil. Maya had trained for years to take down networks of violent insurgents. She'd infiltrated warlords' dens with nothing but a flash drive and a lie. And now, she had a target again. Not for blood but for truth. And she was going to expose every lie the police department buried beneath protocols and paperwork. She reached out to an old contact, call sign, Ghost. Retired intel, now working cybersecurity in New York. Maya? His voice cracked through the encrypted line. Didn't think I'd hear from you again. She didn't waste time. I need every digital footprint of the officers involved. Phones, emails, logs. Quietly. He was silent, then said, "This about Marcus?" She exhaled. "They shot him in front of me. Unarmed." Pause. "I'm in." By week's end she had everything. Audio clips contradicting the officers' statements. Footage they tried to delete. Even texts between the two officers joking about another thug off the street. Maya stared at her screen, heart thudding. This wasn't panic. This was evil cloaked in authority. And she wasn't going to just bring it to light, she was going to make sure it lit the whole corrupt house on fire. In that moment, Reaper 6 returned. She wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. She was a Delta Force operative on a domestic battlefield. And her mission: unmask the system, break the silence, and make them regret the day they underestimated the wrong woman. It began with a press conference, but not the kind held by public officials trying to control the narrative. Maya rented a small room at a local community center. No stage, no flashing cameras. Just a projector, a laptop, and a room full of reporters, activists, and community members who were tired of headlines with no closure. She stood in front of them, calm and composed, wearing a black jacket with no insignias, no makeup, and eyes that had seen too much to be afraid. "I am Maya Thompson," she said, "and I'm not just the widow of Marcus Thompson, I am a former operative of Delta Force. And I have proof of what really happened." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even some journalists sat up straighter. She clicked play. On the screen behind her, a collection of audio and video files played in sequence. First, dashcam footage showing the officers laughing moments before they pulled Marcus over. Then bodycam recordings clearly contradicting their claim that he lunged at them. Finally, the texts, vile, racist, and without remorse. The crowd was silent when the video ended. But Maya didn't stop there. She laid out a timeline: what happened, how the internal affairs report had been falsified, and how surveillance footage had been intentionally erased. All the data had been mirrored and time-stamped by third-party tech experts she had worked with through Ghost. This wasn't just an emotional plea. It was a surgical takedown, the kind only a tactician could orchestrate. It wasn't just about exposing two rogue officers. It was about spotlighting a system built to protect them. News spread fast. Within hours, her footage went viral. National media picked up the story. Civil rights attorneys reached out. Maya gave interviews, but only on her terms. She didn't want to become a martyr or a trending topic. She wanted accountability, charges, reform, and consequences. The mayor's office was forced to issue a public statement. The police chief, visibly shaken during a press conference, announced the suspension of both officers pending further investigation. But Maya wasn't satisfied. Suspensions weren't justice. She wanted them arrested. 1 week later, under public pressure, the state's attorney general ordered a grand jury investigation. Protesters flooded the streets, not in chaos but in unity. They chanted Marcus's name. Held up signs with Maya's military photo next to her wedding picture. "Delta Widow demands truth," read one headline. "They shot the wrong man, and messed with the wrong woman," read another. The entire city seemed to awaken. Behind the scenes, Maya kept pushing. She met with lawmakers, demanding legislation for mandatory bias testing in police academies and automatic third-party investigations in officer-involved shootings. She testified before committees, her voice calm but thunderous. "I served this country in war zones. But the most dangerous battlefield I ever walked was the one where my husband bled on our own street." Eventually, the grand jury returned indictments. The two officers were arrested, charged with manslaughter, tampering with evidence, and misconduct. Maya didn't celebrate. She stood outside the courthouse, facing cameras again. "This isn't justice, it's accountability. True justice would mean Marcus still tucking in our son at night." But behind her, the crowd applauded. Not because it erased the pain, but because she had forced a reckoning. And that's when Maya finally wept. Quietly. Not because she was broken, but because the mission was finally in motion. Her war wasn't over, but she had made them see. Made them answer. And in doing so, gave power back to people who had long been silenced. Maya stood at Marcus's grave again, this time not alone. Around her were veterans, activists, mothers who had lost children to police violence, and strangers who had watched her story unfold. The headstone had changed. Now it bore not only Marcus's name but an inscription Maya had personally chosen: "Fallen husband. Loving father. The fire that lit the fight." She placed a folded Delta Force flag at the base, not to say goodbye, but to mark the beginning of a new kind of mission. The case had ignited something far beyond city limits. Maya's actions triggered investigations in multiple precincts across the state. Officers who had previously escaped accountability were now under review. New policies were being discussed in state legislatures, including mandatory release of body cam footage within 48 hours of any use of force incident and independent civilian oversight boards with real authority. The name Marcus Thompson became more than a hashtag. It became legislation. She returned to her quiet home, the one that once echoed with Marcus's laughter and their son's playful footsteps. Now it was filled with letters. Some from people she'd helped, some from women asking how to fight their own battles, and some from cops. "Thank you," read one letter from a former officer. "You reminded me what honor really means." She pinned that one on the fridge next to her son's drawings. He had drawn a picture of her wearing a cape, standing between two monsters labeled bad cops and lies. He called it, "Mom Saves the World." The pain didn't vanish, but it found direction. Maya founded the Thompson Initiative, a nonprofit aimed at providing legal support to families affected by racially motivated violence. With funding from veterans organizations, tech donors, and even a few quiet allies from the intelligence community, she turned her trauma into a platform. The mission: truth, reform, and healing. One family at a time. One law at a time. The woman once known for covert operations was now being called the Justice Widow by national news. But she didn't seek fame. Her goal was always personal and deeply human. "I don't want revenge," she said during a televised interview. "I want a world where no child grows up afraid their father won't come home because of the color of his skin." Her words cut through the screen. Not as a soldier. Not as a grieving widow. But as a woman who refused to stay silent. And that's where we leave this powerful story today, on the steps of justice, paved by a woman they tried to overlook. They thought Maya was just another wife, another name in a report. But she was Delta. She was fire. And when they took her husband, they woke up the storm that would shake the very system they hid behind. What do you think, viewers? Would you have stood as strong as Maya did? How would you fight for justice if your world was shattered in a moment? Let us know in the comments below. Your voice matters. Your support matters. If you were moved by this story, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs hope ***, and don't forget to subscribe to Talecraft for more powerful real-life stories that inspire, awaken, and transform. This isn't just a channel, it's a movement. A place where courage meets truth, and silence meets storytelling. We'll be back with another powerful tale. Until then, stay bold, stay brave, and stay human.